Okay, just a brief video here to walk you through the kind of the one formal paper assignment I'm giving you for this class. So this assignment, as you can see at the top of this page here, is due on Friday, June 26th. There'll be a folder under the weekly assignments where you can submit your paper as a Word document, preferably. So look for that. So what I'm asking you to do here is it's an essay in two parts. More or less, you can think of this in terms. I mean, I'll just jump down to the format here. I'm thinking of roughly kind of an 8-page paper, a 12-point font, double spaced, and think of it in kind of split into two parts. You can almost think of it as two 4-page papers, all kind of culminating towards a singular goal. So what I want you to do is the first thing is to choose a myth, and I'm asking you to choose a version of the myth that you can find in Robert Graves' collection, The Greek Myths. You can find this under the Research Resources tab on the course Blackboard site. We'll go over there in just a moment. So either find a kind of a version of a myth, and I choose Graves' collection because the vast majority of the both the major and minor Greek myths you can find there. So it's just kind of a common foundation to work from. Or there's also a really excellent website, theoi.com. Theoi is just Greek for gods. This too is a really quite a wonderful, not as comprehensive I think as Graves, but a really extensive resource of what we might call kind of primary source versions of Greek myths. So what I want you to do is to choose a myth, and you're going to want to choose something that is probably falls into kind of the major myth camp, to give you enough to analyze and to talk about. And then in the first part of your paper, I want you to analyze it. And here I have a number of questions you might consider. And I mean, don't feel like you just have to go through and answer all of these. I'm not expecting that. These are really just to kind of get you thinking, and so you can focus in a direction that you find interesting. So what do you take to be the overall message and moral of your chosen myth? How might an ancient audience have read it and interpreted? Are there other similar myths to this one that we covered in class? Maybe compare and contrast them. How are they similar? How are they different? Contextualize it. How would a Greek audience have likely interpreted or used the story, maybe compared to how we might read the story today? What, if anything, does your myth have to say about the nature of humanity, the gods, and morality? You could even, you could take even one of these questions and focus your whole first part on. Or what do we know, if anything, about the author of the version you've chosen? That's going to be rare unless you're choosing something like Homer. Well, even with Homer, we don't know much about him, or maybe a Greek tragedy, a play that might work along these lines. Does knowing something about the author help understand why the tale is told in the way it is? Is your myth a part of a larger work? Is it kind of one section of a much larger poem? If so, how does it fit into the whole? If there are multiple versions of your chosen story, how do they contrast and compare? So use these questions as they apply, as you find them useful. Again, don't feel like you need to answer all of them, but this should kind of get you thinking of ways you might analyze a primary source version of a myth. And then in part two, what I want you to do is, using that very same myth that you chose up here, is find another treatment or two, again, whatever works, of that story, but from a later time period. And here I'm using as kind of your cutoff. Find a version of that myth, kind of roughly from the Renaissance era. So that's roughly about the year 1500 AD to the present day. And do a similar kind of comparison and contrast as you do in part one. So here, your version of the myth could be a number of things. It could be another written version. It could be a literary version. It could be a painting or paintings, sculpture, mosaic, poetry. You could choose a film, a television program. I know in the past, lots of students have chosen Disney's Hercules as their second part and compared it to kind of the ancient version of the Heracles myth of here. Television show. A lot of students I've had have noticed lots of corollaries with Greek myth with the television show Supernatural. So I mean, but whatever you can find, any medium. Be it artistic, be it visual, be it literary, in which that tale is retold. and keep it as specific as you can. Do it. I would say it's in your best interest in a paper like this, which is all told not all that long. Keep it to kind of one treatment of the story. But if you wanted to do, maybe two or maybe three paintings, that might work. But I leave it up to you to kind of find what's interesting to you. And then here are some questions for part two. What are the major differences between your version, say a film version for a modern contemporary Western audience to the ancient version? What's added? What's left out? Why might that be? Do the differing versions have different morals to them? What does it tell us about ancient use of myth versus the way we use these myths? How are the differing versions reflective of the cultures and times that produced them? Why do you think this myth was preserved by a later culture? If applicable, how does changing the medium from literary to, say, film or painting change the way that the myth is presented? We've already, in the lectures I've given you, I've shown you how, literary versions differ from even the way the Greeks painted these versions on vases. Can a painting or film do things a written narrative cannot? Why and how? What makes your myth malleable or changeable enough that radically different cultures can find something new and relevant in it? So again, don't feel like you need to answer all of these questions here. They're here just to simply get you thinking, and hopefully you can find a story that you're interested in, and really and at the end of the day to really explore how the ancients told myths, how we use these myths, the things that we do similar and things that we do different, and that speaks to kind of the survival and the changing nature of these myths throughout the ages. And then here, just kind of the nuts and bolts here. I'm looking for at least 8 pages of written prose, double spaced, 12-point font, just the standard Microsoft Word margins that are given to you. Give it a good title page. This would not be included in those 8 pages, an unnumbered title page. And with that title page, give your paper a creative title, your name, the name of the class, my name, the date, all that usual stuff. And then a separate bibliography page, the primary and secondary sources you're using on a separate bibliography page at the end of the paper. Again, this would not be included in those 8 pages. The 8 pages just applies to your written analysis, page 1 through at least page 8. And then here, I'd like you to consult at least 2 secondary scholarly sources and cite them throughout your paper in accordance with an accepted academic style. APA is very common, MLA, Chicago. As long as you're consistent, it doesn't bother me what academic style you use, and there's lots of web help out there to help you kind of format your paper. So, and what I mean by secondary scholarly sources, this would be a book chapter, a book, an article that has some relevance to your topic, to your the myths that you've chosen. And so what I'm asking here is that would rule out all kind of loose web sources. So as wonderful as Wikipedia is, and I love Wikipedia, in academic writing it is not considered a scholarly source. It's a great place to start. The best Wikipedia pages will have a great bibliography at the bottom that you could use as legit sources, but I don't want to see citations of just somebody's blog or some web source on mythology. It has to be something that's past some standard of expertise. So if you log in with your GRCC account onto the library website, in fact, I have links to these things on the Blackboard website, you can find lots of help. There's lots of databases. This is a great one. JSTOR is a great source of humanities scholarship. It's searchable, it's very user friendly, and it will take you to articles as PDFs that you can just pull up on your screen at no cost to you. So I'll get over to the Blackboard website in just a second to show you these further. Each page must be numbered except for the title page, and if you are doing, say, paintings or sculptures or mosaic or anything like that in your part 2, I would ask that you add just a brief appendix and put those images, some images of those paintings in there. Just assume that I may not be familiar with the ones that you're choosing. That would just be really helpful to me as I read your paper. And again, an appendix of this sort would not count towards required page length. All right, let me zip over to the course Blackboard site here. So if you on the Blackboard site, if you click on Final Paper Information, you can find that same prompt that I just showed you. A couple that I was walking through just now, and then if you click down on Research Resources, There's a number of useful links here. So at the bottom here, here's Robert Graves' Greek myths. This is a huge collection of various Greek myths, very useful. And here's a link to that Theoi website, which will again give lots of kind of primary accounts of notable myths, and then some kind of research help here. So if you click on this link here, this will take you to the GRCC library page for humanities research, and all of these there's the JSTOR I was just telling you about. All of these links here are searchable databases that will help you find lots of secondary sources. And if you choose a major enough myth, I think you should be able to find a number of articles and a number of helps that will help you kind of craft your argument in your paper. And I'm only asking you to come up to track down two. To kind of root your own argument in arguments that other scholars have made. So any of these would be useful, searchable, and you can pull up a relevant article as you need it. Google Scholar is another one. It's more kind of broad, but most of the stuff that you find in Google Scholar is going to be a legitimate secondary source. Here too, a link to citation help. This is one actually from Calvin University down the road. And here too, you can just simply choose your style. Even if you don't know, like, well, how do I cite an article? How do I cite a movie and put it in a bibliography? Here you just click on the style that you're using, MLA, APA, and Chicago. Those are the big three. And then you just fill in the blanks of whatever source you're using, a painting, a movie, an article, a book. And then when you hit submit, it'll spit it out and how it should look in your bibliography. You can simply just copy and paste. It's really, really quite useful. So do use that stuff. All right, let me know if you have questions. Again, this will be due on Friday, June 26th, right at the end of our last week of class together. But I am happy to help you any way that I can. If you want to bounce some ideas off me, send me a rough draft, ask for help finding sources. I am very, very happy to get you going on that. All right. See you later.